This is the DJI Mavic 4 Pro. It's a drone that has a number of upgrades compared to the Mavic 3 Pro, as well as having some unique features that set it apart from any of the other drones on the market. In today's video, I'm going to give you my thoughts about it, explain my experience with it, and also talk about some of the features I like and I don't like, because there are a few. So I have the Creator Combo package, which comes with the DJI RC2 Pro, as well as the 512 gigabytes of onboard storage. That onboard storage is, for the most part, kind of a preference. I will say that the RC Pro 2 is very cool and is a unique thing that you currently can only buy with the Creator Combo. The 512 gigabyte version is also kind of a unique thing. You can get an SD card and it's not that big of an issue. If you're doing a lot of photography, a lot of quick photography, maybe, as I'll touch on earlier, maybe using this for photogrammetry, some automated flight plans with WaypointMap, you might want to consider getting the 512 gigabyte just so you can kind of automate that and not be restricted by how fast you can take pictures in the time shots mode. Inside the package, at least the Creator Combo, you'll also have the battery and then the 3-way battery charger, as well as the charging brick, which uses the proprietary, I actually think it's the same one as the DJI FPV drones, but the proprietary connector in order to charge it. So you'll have to get a separate charger if you lose it. So keep that in mind. That's not just your standard USB-C charger. You're going to actually have to have a different charger that specifically comes with this drone. All I'm going to say with the RC Pro 2 is that I really do like the fact that the screen itself folds down the joysticks. I don't necessarily like that the power button is up on the screen. I think maybe having it back down kind of more where you're familiar with. Also, the antennas do kind of stick out in a weird situation. So it does allow you to prop up the RC if you're just like running, for example, an automated flight path. But I definitely do think that I wish the antennas could have been flipped upwards so that you're not necessarily dealing with having it at a weird angle if you just want to sit the controller flat. Also, the joysticks and the whole RC is a little bit bigger, and I also personally do like this layout a little bit more. You have a lot more buttons to customize with, and having the ability to flip the whole screen vertically does make for a big difference as well when you're recording in a vertical mode. As touched on earlier, this drone does support WaypointMap for automated mission planning. So if you wanted to run an automated mission to maybe do something like photogrammetry, you could. That is a possibility. I'm not going to touch on this more. I have a whole separate video talking about how great this drone is specifically for 3D scanning. So if you want to check that out, I'll include that in the description as well. The main feature advertised about this drone is its ability to roll the gimbal, which I personally did not really think this was a huge selling point. Not necessarily that I don't like it. It is cool, but there are a number of restrictions that you still get with this kind of gimbal setup. One is that when it is in the vertical mode, you are heavily restricted by how far up and down you can tilt the gimbal, which compared to the DJI Mini 4 Pro, which has the ability to, of course, flip it vertically very similarly, on the Mavic 4 Pro, you are restricted on how much you can actually tilt it up and down, whereas the Mini 4 Pro you are not. So if you really want that vertical video, that true 4K vertical video, that is a possibility. However, also keep in mind that this has 6K, so you are getting a good substantial bit higher resolution that you could then crop inwards. Another caveat that I thought was interesting is this drone has a lot longer minimum focus distance, which kind of makes sense. This is a much more like professional gear drone. You're probably out taking professional photos and videos of other things, not so much the tracking. But compared to, for example, the DJI Air 3S, which has a very substantially shorter minimum focus distance, I thought that the bokeh that you could get on using it just like a regular camera, a video camera, not like for photography or anything like that, just using it on the ground, stationary, I was able to get a substantially shorter focus distance, which looks actually a lot better than what I was able to get on the Mavic 4 Pro. It does still focus fine, but it was interesting that the focus distance was substantially longer on the Mavic 4 Pro, the minimum focus distance. The camera quality on this drone, I just need to take a moment to talk a lot about this because so when it comes to pictures, I just want to say it how it is. This drone puts out some phenomenal, very high definition, very detailed images, and you can't get around that. I think the original Mavic, the Mavic 3 Pro, and for the sake of this section, I'm just going to refer to the Mavic 3 in general because it has the same core sensor on all three models that existed, the original 3, the 3 Pro, and the 3 Classic. So the Mavic 3 itself had a 20 megapixel main sensor, and while it was great, the pictures that came out of it were okay at times and were not super high resolution. You couldn't blow them up a lot. These images that come out of this drone, the Mavic 4 Pro, are a lot higher resolution. And I guess for me, I especially remember when the Air 3 came out, even more so the Air 3S with its 1-inch sensor, and it put out some incredibly high quality images. That 50 megapixel Sony 1-inch sensor was great. It was able to put out images that were higher definition, and I actually thought were more usable than what the Mavic 3 Pro was able to put out on its 20 megapixel sensor. Now with this drone, the pictures are, and with this one, the Mavic 4 Pro, these pictures are really high definition and really good. Now, the only caveat I've seen really with that is that there is a little bit of noise, especially in the dark, and the pictures don't resolve well in the dark when you're taking pictures of stuff. But that is honestly with anything, and I think in highlight situations, you're going to get phenomenal pictures. I do not personally think that flying in the dark is a very common occurrence, especially for a lot of drone pilots. The noise and stuff is not that big of a concern for me, and I think overall the picture quality on this is just so far ahead of anything else you can currently buy on the market. Also, the special 0.1 lux obstacle avoidance, I flew a couple times in the dark, and maybe I just live in a dark area, but it never engaged. It really was only doing obstacle avoidance in what I considered to be bright daylight. The 0.1 lux, even like in next to my house and stuff, with some light illumination from like the windows, from the spotlights and stuff, it still struggled. It didn't engage. I don't know if that's worth it for everybody because most people are just flying above the trees, but it is something to consider as well. It's not anything special. I personally didn't really see much of a difference compared to some of my other drones, which I believe this has a 0.1 or a 1 lux. And then the Mavic just needs daylight as it is. So just keep that in mind, that it's not really as big of a selling point as I thought it would be. On the Mavic 4 Pro, you have three cameras. You have a 1x, a 3x, and a 6x. So keep in mind that the 1x is that 4/3 inch 100 megapixel Hasselblad sensor. Then you have the middle sensor, which I believe is the 3x 48 megapixel one. It is the same one that is on the, at least in spec wise, the same one that is on the Mavic 3 Pro, the 3X, as well as the Air 3 family, even the Air 3 version 1 and the Air 3S, they still have that 3X megapixel sensor on the, or 48 megapixel sensor on the top. So that is the same sensor. It is replicated on all those drones. So I'm not going to talk about that one a lot. What is really interesting though is that the Mavic 4 Pro has a 6X camera that is a 50 megapixel, I believe 1/1.5 inch sensor. So it is a little bit larger, and it also has more megapixels. It also is a shorter zoom distance. So the original Mavic family actually has a 7X, but that is a 12 megapixel sensor. So just keep that in mind, is that you might be able to replicate 7X, but you can't actually zoom in all the same way that you can as on the original Mavic. The original Mavic, at least the Mavic that I have here, the first one that they made, had the ability to zoom up in, at least on the camera, up to 28 times, or I believe this was 24, or I believe 23 or something like that when I was testing it. So it does not have the same zoom capability, but it does have at least a nicer sensor that you in theory could crop in more, because 50 megapixels at 6X and 12 megapixels at 7X, you can crop in and get another multiplication in terms of zoom. As for the video quality, I do wish that this was 8K. And what I mean by that is the sensor can definitely support it. It's got 100 megapixels. Like, clearly that does have the capability to do 8K, but I know why they did it, and that's because it starts undercutting their professional Inspire 3 drones. And I think, yes, they have the original, whatever, X6 or X9, the camera that goes on their Inspire drones that is 6K, and then they have the 8K version. I think that is why they didn't do it. I very much think, though, it is a little frustrating when you have like $800 drones like the Hover Air Pro Max, and that drone shoots 8K. It weighs under 250 grams. It's like under 200 grams, and it does shoot sharper video in certain circumstances if it's well lit. Yes, the sensor doesn't look the same. Yes, there's some noise. yes, the 8K it's just 8K for this heck of saying 8K, but it does shoot, in my opinion, pretty crisp video. So I think it is just interesting that you have cheaper, much smaller drones offering 8K when this drone clearly could have offered it. It just didn't. So I think going forward, it would have been nice. That would have been my biggest complaint, especially with this huge step up in terms of sensor. I think that would have been a nice added. I'll also talk about, like, again, touching on this towards the end when we talk about, like, should you upgrade? That is something to keep in mind as well. Also, another thing to point out too is that the Mavic 4 Pro's video, in my opinion, downscales to 4K better than the Mavic 3 Pro's 5.1K. And what that means is that if you're shooting 4K on both of these drones, it looks very similar, in my opinion. However, if you then take the 6K that the Mavic 4 Pro puts out and downscale it, especially since it has 6K versus that 5.1K, I think the 6K does a better job downscaling than the 5.1K, and I think it actually ends up looking better in that case. Especially when you're looking at this video now, when you preview the video and you have downscaled it, in my opinion, looks much sharper than the 5.1K downscaled on the Mavic 3 Pro. I think the 4K video itself, and this is going to be a hot take, is pretty much comparable. I just think that then when you take that downscaled version, which is probably what a lot of people are planning on doing, it does look a little bit better. Overall, though, I don't know if that necessarily warrants an upgrade. It is not that big of a difference, but I did find that, like, the 6K downscaled did look a little bit sharper. But again, do you really need that level of sharpness if you're just putting out 4K video anyway? In my testing, when I was running a couple different things, I have a weird use case. I do a lot of photography, I do a lot of videography, and then most of my time is spent doing photogrammetry. In my photogrammetry, I saw about 45 minutes of flight time with basically new out-of-the-box batteries. That is, again, less than what is advertised. I think 51 minutes is advertised, but also keep in mind that, like, the Mavic 4 Pro gets about, I think, really like 38 minutes, and then my Mavic with however old batteries gets about like 35. So it is somewhat of a difference, and I think especially when you're doing like longer missions or you're flying it, like for a good like 3 hours, I was able to pretty much fly this, look at the video, go out and fly a lot of the photography and videography that you're seeing in this review, and then go from there. Also, speaking of which, I will include all the samples of all the like full-size clips in the description, so you can take a look at those and you can view those and figure out, like, make your own judgments there. I'll have some of the A and B comparisons down there as well, so you can kind of in depth take a look at them and see what you prefer. This drone, in my opinion, is a little quieter, which is surprising given that it's actually heavier than the original Mavics, but it is something also to keep in mind. I don't know if it's still... The problem with me is I personally feel like there is a point in which the drone can kind of follow you around. You can have a microphone and you can't really hear the drone. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I don't think that this is anywhere close to that. It is quieter. Is it like, it's probably like 10% quieter. It's enough that you notice it, but not like, it still makes audio recording around it unpractical. So take that as you wish. This drone does have substantially faster obstacle avoidance detection. And what I mean by that is that when it flies forward, when you're flying and you're tracking something, you can move a lot faster. So this drone does move substantially faster than the Mavic 3 Pro and the 3 in terms of how fast that it moves while detecting obstacles. So you don't have to put it in sport mode. I personally don't like taking off the obstacle avoidance if I can avoid it, just because that's just an additional redundancy. So if you're in Europe, this drone actually is above, I believe, the A2 class, which means that you actually have to get an additional license in order to fly it. In the US, we just have a restriction of that 55-pound limit for at least the Part 107 commercial operators. But I do think that is definitely very interesting that this drone does exceed that weight limit a little bit. It is a very heavy drone, and I would not be flying it over people. So just another thing to keep in mind. Also, if in the US you can buy one, that's another issue. And finally, that brings me whether or not you should buy it. So compared to the Mavic 3, and I'm saying all the threes, the Classic, etc., and the Mavic 4, if you really need high quality photography, I would say go ahead and get it. The photography is definitely the clear and above winner and upgrade on this drone. You have the ability to take vertical and horizontal shots, although with some restrictions on that gimbal angle. It is definitely a clear step above. However, when it comes to the videography, if that is your main priority, the 5.1 versus 5.1K versus the 6K, I personally do not think that's that big of a difference. A lot of us are just downscaling to 4K anyway. I have not seen a lot of people push for 8K, and I personally don't think we will, as monitors really, just because of how many pixels we physically can see at that distance. So I think if you're doing videography and that is substantially important to you, I personally don't think it's worth the upgrade just from what I've seen in my comparisons. It's very clear that the Mavic 4 Pro is a extremely professionally focused drone, and I would say it's for very serious photographers and videographers.